Welcome back to New Amsterdam Radio, the podcast for creatives. It is I, the mayor, Flobo Boyce, in the mayor's office, hanging with people who are doing the dang thing. And now, if you don't think about me, you know I like associate with people that make sure they do jumps and leaps in their life. And my guest did just that, broadcasting live from the rainforest of Costa Rica. I gotta say, what's up to Maria Joyner today? How's it going?
Awesome. How are you?
You know what? I am doing fantastic. The beginning of the week, Monday, I was like, oh man, I gotta handle some errands and stuff, and errands always seems to lord over me. But today, I'm feeling pretty fine.
Amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
started my day with some nice yoga in the middle of the rainforest. So it was a nice way to ease into a Tuesday.
Do you try to get up to see yoga at a certain time, like sunrise, or it's kind of like when I get up, now time to stretch?
Well, the location where I live like basically on an eco resort / sustainable and regenerative farm. So they offer it twice a day for the hotel guests. So I just typically join in on the classes in the mornings at 7 a.m.
Were you always somebody that was eco-focused, eco-centric?
No, I moved to Costa Rica. Well, I came to visit Costa Rica in 2014, actually to this same place. It's called Rancho Margot. It's
Mhm.
near La Fortuna. Near San Carlos, and I was just really intrigued. I'd never seen anything like this before. So I'm from the States. I'm from Georgia. So my extent of gardening was like telling my parents, "I'm never going to do this again when I grow up. This is so lame. This sucks." So those are the memories I had of gardening growing up. So no, I definitely wasn't really into this. I never really seen anything like permaculture, sustainable living until I visited Costa Rica.
Sure. Are you from the Atlanta area? I'm just curious.
So I grew up in Savannah,
Okay,
and then
yeah, for sure.
and then I moved to Atlanta in the early 2000s, and was there until I moved to Costa Rica.
I went to Flagler College in Florida, and at the time when we were NIA, our rival school was SCAD, so you had to go to Savannah all the time and be like, "Yeah, I beat SCAD," which was kind of like a low bar because they're all art students,
Yeah.
but we won really handedly. You know what I mean? But the reason why I'm asking about whether or not Savannah versus Atlanta is because you have a background in the world of tech and tech startups, and even though that has burned out plenty of people, you navigated it pretty well during your tenure. Talk to us about that, going into that field at the time of that big boom, especially in the South.
Yeah. So when I look back on like the most sort of exciting and just like adrenaline and just that was just such a great time in my life. So I moved up to Atlanta in the early 2000s. I ran a photography company. Like through college, I actually studied photography and minored in sculpture. And I ran a photography business. And then in the late 2000, like 2008, 2009, things sort of, there was an economic downturn, and I was kind of starting to not really like photography. I was a young business entrepreneur, and a young artist, mixing the two things together. And it was really challenging. So I take like shoots I wouldn't want to take. And that wouldn't be fulfilling. And I really didn't know how to run a business and then also cultivate an art at the same time. So that was the first business that I had before I jumped into tech.
Sure. It's funny because like a lot of times we have entrepreneurs or creatives in the show, and it's always that balance of working on the craft because you want to be competitive with your work, but then you have to like also be good on the business side. And we'll see people either not either or, but you'll see a lot of patterns. And one of the two patterns is always someone that starts phoning it in to be better at the business, or someone gets better at the craft. The business seems to be difficult, and it just burns everybody out, and no one's happy, right?
It's so true. And I think for me, it was easier for me to focus on building myself as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, and leaving the art behind. And so, in the like 2008, 2009, social media was starting to be a thing. There was Twitter, there was Facebook, and companies were starting to look at this as, oh, wow, this is a place I need to be online.
Right.
And so I saw that opportunity, and I decided I would close my photography company and focus on building a social media marketing company. And that was sort of my first entryway into tech. So I found a company, I pitched them, hey, this is what you guys need to do on social media. They said, great. And then I figured out how to do it. as a lot of entrepreneurs do. Find someone to pay you to learn. And that was, it was an email deliverability company. So really niche. They helped tell whether emails were, invalid or valid. And this was about 10 years ago. No, not 10 years ago. This was like 15 years ago almost.
Yeah.
And so that was like new technology then. And from there, that was my entryway into tech. And then from there went, really into the tech startup scene in Atlanta. And helped really build that before I moved to Costa Rica. So I helped organize hackathons, so 72-hour weekends where people came together with business ideas and they met developers and designers and they built prototypes and then pitched the prototypes to investors. And just that's kind of how my whole career in tech started. So it was just really fun.
Well, talk to me about the actual feeling of the whole corporate side and the entrepreneur side, right? Like, even if there are people who are listening now who are lifelong creatives, I mean, I even have sampled corporate life. It is kind of tough to begin with, but then on top of that in tech and on top of that, entrepreneurship is very all hands on deck all the time. So there's no hours to start and end. You're pretty much on call all the time. What was that from like the mental psychological standpoint? I mean, some people are live for it, white knuckle it, YOLO, hustle culture, all that stuff. Other times it can break you. What was your experience during your time in the tech world?
So I'm still living that experience, but very different now. So for me, I was very energized by everything new, and there was so many new technologies coming out, so many new companies, just so many new opportunities to learn, to explore. So for me, that was really energizing. So I ran like a marketing company until 2013, and that company was acqui-hired by an email deliverability startup, a different one. And that was really my one of the first experiences full-time growing a tech startup. And that was exactly like you said. I woke up in the mornings. The first thing I did was open up Slack, check our sales channel and see, what happened overnight. Late evenings, tech events in the evening, but it was really fun. And I left before a big exit. I left in the middle of this journey, which we can talk about in a little while. Mm-hmm. But when I ended up leaving the United States to move to Costa Rica, when I got to Costa Rica is when I realized like how close to burnout I actually was.
Absolutely.
Because there's just so much activity all the time that you don't even have time to reflect on like, how am I feeling or how am I doing? And I enjoyed it. I loved it. It was a really hard decision to make to move from the United States to Costa Rica. But once I got here, I felt the whiplash.
Well, I was going to ask about that next, but I think you said something that really piqued my interest about you're still doing that now. So working with the team over at FounderScale, you're also kind of drawing from your experience and put it into a whole new thing. So tell me more about the business segment and how has business management changed or evolved from then till now?
Well, one of the big reasons that I left the tech, there are many reasons why I left the tech startup, but one of the big reasons why was it was really challenging what I was doing it remote because I was the glue between all the different departments, between tech, between marketing, between leadership, between customer service. And, that and being in a fast-paced tech startup, being able just to pop your head up and be like, hey, here's the question I have and get it answered. That's one of the reasons why I ended up having that. That's one of the reasons why I left. That's one of the reasons why it didn't work. Mm-hmm. But so now fast forward, FounderScale, we founded it in 2020. And our goal, thanks. Yeah, right. In the middle of the pandemic, I actually had a 6-month-old baby. And so it just seemed like a right time. I don't know why.
Right.
But so we founded it. And really our goal was to unlock how we could help founders scale revenue beyond themselves. So we typically work with founders, 1 to 2 million plus, because that first million is the hardest to get. But once you get that first million, then you really have to figure out how to scale beyond that. And most founders can scale, depending on the size of your network, net worth. Most founders can scale their company from their network to maybe 500,000, maybe even $1 million. But once you get beyond that, you run into all the limitations of having to work in the business versus on the business. And you run into limitations around, like, you can't do all the sales, you can't do all the delivery,
Sure.
and you don't want to be an employee in your own business forever.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, we all can. And so it's like, I know the pain. It's like a real
Right.
pain. The pain. And so,
yeah. I can only imagine there'd be some days you're like, wait, I'm also accounts payable and receivable at the same time. Like, this is not fun. This is not what I had signed up in mind or anything like that. But okay, let's talk about the actual transition though, because I've talked to expats before, and there's some similarities about looking for a change of scenery, but the actual reasoning behind and the conference with your old life, telling the people you are close to you, I'm leaving, seeing a new crew when you land, it's a whole different experience for everyone else. What made you do the jump? Did you have any regrets doing the jump? Were you on the plane saying, please turn around? What was that like?
Oh man. So when I first came to Costa Rica in 2014, and I got off of the shuttle, and I got off on this sustainable farm. It's off the grid. It's like hydroelectric. I mean, completely off the grid. They grow, they produce a lot of their food here. It's this really amazing thing. Well, when I stepped foot here, like, I just had this just feeling of, I can't even really describe. Like, I come home, and it was this really strange feeling. And I was like, well, that's weird. And so I came back in 2015 because I was so interested to see, like, how a place like this actually functions. Like, how are you actually off the grid? How do you grow what you feed to the guests and what you feed to the employees here? And so I came back in 2015 to volunteer, and I was so in love with this whole way of life of, planting seeds, watching those seeds grow, harvesting that, and then eating that at dinner over, a month period, 2-month period. And I built technology systems, or, my team built technology systems. And so to see natural systems in play where, yeah, there's some input by humans, maybe we plant the seeds, but if we went away, these systems would still function. I was just really fascinated by everything. And then I started really wondering, I mean, I was building email deliverability software to help email marketers. And it's like, does that even matter in the grand scheme of things?
Sure.
And so I just started caring less about, like, what was going on Twitter, and more about, oh, let's go find the red-eyed tree frog, or, ooh, let's go look for snakes, or, let's go explore the forest. And I just had this whole mental shift. And so I stayed down here. It was supposed to be for a month. But 2 months passed, and my leadership team was like, Maria, like, what the hell's going on? And I was like, just give me some more time. And then the third month passed, and they were like, this is insane. Like, you have to come back. Like, I was one of the founders of we're one of the co-founders of the company, and they're like, you have to come back. And so I went back. But the whole time I was trying to convince myself, like, I'm not crazy, right? And I guess near the end, I started to realize maybe I am crazy, but in order to do something like this, you have to be a little crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a movie. Like, it's kind of like, hey, like, you have a whole life here. You're like, yeah, I understand that, but there's something was going there. Because I feel like a lot of times it gets romanticized. You just like drop the bag and say, I'm home. But there really was kind of a slow burn when you realize, well, I can see myself here. I can contribute here. I see us contributing to the earth. You decide to come here full time. And that's it. So does the whole life come with you? Did you bring some family members with you? Or just you solo, 2 duffel bags, and then experiences? Like, what was that like?
Yeah. So at the time I had a boyfriend of, I think it was 6 or 7 years. I had 2 dogs. He thought I was crazy. He came to Costa Rica one of the months, and he was like, I'm never moving here. Like, screw this place. But he ended up moving. So we moved in January 2016. Our 2 dogs, our dogs were service animals. So they flew on the plane with us. They just kind of sat under the seat the whole time and chilled. And then we also paid for someone else to fly with us so we could bring 4 more bags or 3 more bags, because it was cheaper to pay for someone else's flight than it was to ship stuff here.
Smart move.
So yeah, we had probably 12 bags with all of our belongings in it, our 2 dogs, us, and we flew here, rented a car. When we pulled up with all the luggage, the guy looked at me like, there's no way that girl is going to be able to get all that stuff in the car. But that's a great, in the South, we have a saying, we know how to put 50 pounds of crap in a 10-pound bag.
Mhm.
So we did that. And yeah, we moved here. I rented like a ranch on a farm. And so it was just this house and a lot of land. And two of the people that I met, they came and worked for me. And so we just started growing what we ate. We raised animals, and we had hens to lay eggs, and also chickens for dinner. And so I moved to Costa Rica and started living the life like I had experienced on the farm.
Sure.
And yeah, it all, and that's how it started.
Yeah, absolutely. I studied abroad in Costa Rica between my junior year and senior year in college. I was a Latin American studies minor, excuse me. I had a Spanish major, but I didn't declare it, and by some technical prowess, I didn't get the degree for it. A little salty about that still. Point being, it really does change your life. Costa Rica does. The idea of going from one place to another. And for a while, I was a guy who was like, when I was living in Heredia, I believed like I was one of those obnoxious college people. I would say being in a place long term, there is a point where you have culture shock. You kind of miss being back where you're from, and you kind of get over it, and you have yourself ingrained. Let's talk about how you're ingrained. I mean, you are still running a business over there. You're still managing a team over there. What's that like being perhaps miles away from people on your side, on your team, on your staff?
Yeah. So, I'm used to it by now. So since I've moved to Costa Rica, I've worked remote, and I've worked remote primarily with only going back to the States once or twice a year. So I'm used to it by now. And the way that we built the company, that FounderScale, was originally, it's shifted slightly, but originally we focus on hiring focused part-time. So people who really only wanted to work 20-ish, 25 hours a week and wanted to live their lives. And so what that enabled us to do was to build teams who had basically focused on certain areas. And then just technology communication like Slack, email, Loom. Loom is a lifesaver. And then just hopping on meetings, having regular check-ins. I mean, for me, it feels pretty normal. I know for my co-founder, it's been challenging because he goes into an office. He has team members who come into the office with him. And so I do think it's really preference on how one works. But in the sense of like, could I do this if I was a member of a fast-growing startup? I think it would be much more challenging.
Sure. What's interesting about the fact that you have this knowledge and this experience is that you're not keeping it to yourself. You're helping and empowering other business owners, especially women, launch their brands as well. Light bulb idea. What was that like? I always call it the napkin moment. We're at home one day being like, I can help other people. Did someone ask you for help? And you said, oh, this is something I can do for other women that want to enter the space. Tell me more about Quantum Leap, how that everything came together.
Yeah, that's a wild story. So last year, I came to Costa Rica, and ever since I moved here, my goal is to be full-time farmer and eventually get out of technology. But as you might imagine, there's a lot more. And so, my husband's I have a 4-year-old son. My husband's a stay-at-home dad. So the technology has always been there.
Yeah.
So I've wanted to move eventually away from that. So last year, at the beginning of the year, I've been trying to figure out like, how do I shift from like being a tech consultant and really having this role where I'm working with clients to building something of my own that's more aligned with just how I'm living now. And so I just got this idea to start this retreat called the Quantum Leap Women's Experience. And it originally came as an idea to maybe do a course, but just as it manifested, it turned into a retreat. I mentioned it to two of my friends. I have a friend who is probably the best graphic designer that I know, at least for business branding. And she was like, I'm in. And so we decided in April to launch this. So we launched we built a website, got it up, launched it, and we had our first event in September of last year. So from idea to reality in 6 months, we had seven attendees. And all of them since then have gone on to take steps to follow their passion. So one attendee wanted to move to Mexico. She's lived in Mexico since last October. Another one wanted to start a sort of like a healing and wellness truck. So sort of a play on a food truck. And she's bought it. And I don't know if it's open for business, but when I checked in with her a couple of months ago, I mean, she sent me a picture of her smiling with the truck. And so it's just amazing to see how these different women who came down here to basically get the skills they needed to make a big life change and how that's manifested.
Yeah. Oh, how did you decide about the, I want to say the firmness of the retreat, going from like wellness and massages and talking things out versus, oh, here are some actionable things. You didn't want to make it to a boot camp, but you also don't want to make it a summer camp. Like, how'd you decide what activities we're going to do, which ones we're going to wait till the next one?
So I chose the retreat based on the moon cycles. If anybody follows moon cycles, they say that a new moon's really great for manifesting and full moon's really great for releasing. So the retreat's actually based around the full moon cycle. So women come down here, and we don't call it a retreat intentionally because the idea is to come down here to do work. Sure. So you are going to be forced to disconnect because there's no cell service. The Wi-Fi is only in main areas. So you're going to be forced to disconnect, which is great for women because typically women always feel like they have to respond to somebody or cater to their needs or, oh, I just, we'll do this one thing. So they're forced to connect. And then we really focus on underlying fears of what's keeping you from moving forward with what you want to do. And a lot of those fears, they're really similar. They're around scarcity, my ability to produce for my family, what happens if this doesn't work. And so we have 4 workshops where we go through fear. Then we have like a full moon ceremony. We burn our fears. We go through clarity and purpose. And then the final workshop is putting together an action plan. And throughout those, we also have activities designed to help reinforce what we're talking about. So we do have some fun. We go to the hot springs, the volcanic hot springs. So the water is heated by the volcano, which is a really nice experience. We also do learn more about the sustainable farm. There's yoga and meditations. So there are activities designed to go with the theme, and the content.
Sure.
But it's not really a retreat. People come down here to work, and that's really what we've seen, and that's what we lay out as the expectation.
Absolutely, and that's always good. That was good to have that option as well. Now, you mentioned some graduates. Can I use that word? Alumni, like people who have moved on and found some success. But was there a moment for you in the throes of this experience where you go, "Oh yes, this is what I want to do. This is a win for us. This is what I feel fulfilled doing"?
So I haven't found that yet. Like, I definitely know that I'm on the right path, but I also don't, and just being honest, right? I also don't know that it's like just retreats. And so I think I'm on the right path with this idea of helping people, take these quantum leaps. But I think there's something more there than just retreats. And so there's some other ideas that are worth exploring, such as, online courses, coaching, maybe some sort of products, download workbooks, etc. But I'm still not really sure like what that looks like.
Sure. And you can learn more about that at quantumleapcr.com. The reason why I ask you these questions, and not to like be up in your Kool-Aid and not know the flavor, is that a lot of times when we have thought leaders or those who are really good at what you do and your expertise, we always feel like there's an obligation or a duty to send the elevator back down. And you can do that. But I always feel like we also have to experiment about how we do that to see if we like it or not. So the fact you say you're on the right path is great, because I know sometimes I help out people and I go, I make a mistake. But the fact like, no, I think there's some actionable things. I just got to find out more, maybe a couple pivots, and we're on the right track. That means a lot to not only yourself, but definitely the people you're helping. So thank you for that. As you roll on into 2024, are there any other projects on the horizon as far as extensions of the Quantum Leap or something of your own personal brand that you are looking into?
Yeah, so at the beginning of 2024, just sort of by chance and maybe what was meant to happen. I got a call and I ended up coming back to the farm that I originally visited in Costa Rica, Rancho Margot, just to come back and help them out for a couple weeks in January. And that experience really just reignited my love for this place. And so I talked to the owner and we decided to that my family would be one of the first families to live here. So eventually, right now, this is like an eco hotel and a resort, but the idea is that it becomes a community over the next 20 years or so. And so I have been living at Rancho Margot and really focusing on helping build a regenerative student farm life immersion program. So it's a program that we bring high school students to the farm for 7 days, and they go through classes on regenerative agriculture, permaculture, energy production, so hydroelectric, solar, methane production, how to care for animals, chemical-free animal care and how we handle livestock, cheese making, soap making, and just really all the things on how you would live in a sustainable community. And so one of my focuses is helping bring high school students and college students to here for that program. So that's something I've been focusing on this year. I also just finished a 100-mile race last month. That was a goal I had been, training for. Running.
What kind of race? Running?
Yeah, running. Yeah, 100-mile trail race. So
for those who can't see me, my eyes bugged out.
Yeah,
100 miles. Wow.
So I just finally completed that, and then this year I decided as an entrepreneur to take a downshift because we go in fifth gear all the time. Last year was my year of doing it all, and pulling retreat off. Still running a company, FounderScale, full time, training for the 100-mile race. In October, I ran 80 miles. And so just all those things that January this year, I decided to downshift. And that's what led me to where I'm at right now.
Totally a side question. I mean, no disrespect, but what goes to your mind through mile 50 or 60? What can you possibly be thinking about? Because you're super automatic at that point.
So that's a really great question. And, I think it changes based on the race, but for me, the first, it starts getting hard, 70 or 80 when you're kind of you're really close, but you still have 30 miles to go.
Absolutely.
But the goal when I run, and I always ask runners what they think about. I'm always interested to know what other people are thinking about, but my goal is the more in the moment I can be, that's the goal. So it's almost taking a meditative approach of just focusing on the moment and focusing on one foot in front of the other and not getting too far out of my mind or not thinking about other things. And things pass through my mind, but it's almost like the same approach as if you were giving someone a guide on how to meditate. It's just staying in the moment and and just focusing on that. Which is not always easy, but if you stay in the moment, it kind of keeps the dark place away because running 100 miles, I mean, you could really easy drop into despair and there's no way I can finish this. And what am I thinking? And I'm crazy. And
my running career is basically through my 20s and it's exclusively half marathons, which is light work according to ultra marathoner. But I would say that I like half marathons because 8 or 9 miles in, at least to me, I had that crossroads. Okay, what are you doing this for? And that's why usually I switch from music to podcasts because I can't think about beats per minute or else I'll just blur myself out. And so I'll come back learning a new language or hearing about farm subsidies in Kansas on NPR or something. But it's always cool to see that because I think every runner has their approach. But I can't imagine, I can wholly imagine, but 60, 70, 80 miles in being I still have the will to do 40 or 50 more. I mean, congrats on that.
Thanks.
Here in New Amsterdam, that thank you was thanks. I love it.
Thanks.
I love it. My muscles hurt. Thanks. Here in New Amsterdam Radio, we kind of ask our guests some department questions, some bit of a lightning round if you're down to play.
Sure.
Do you believe in days off? And if so, what do you do on those?
Yes, I believe in days off. I think days off are incredibly important because as founders, as entrepreneurs, as bosses, as leaders, if we're not if we're not giving ourselves that opportunity to refuel and refill and disconnect from the craziness of our businesses and our lives, we're not as effective as we could be. And then I also do think it's important that team members see that from the boss, especially when you work in these startup environments and the society is 7 days a week and you just keep going. And if team members see that the boss takes at least a day off a week and isn't sending emails or responding to emails, I think that also sends a strong message.
What do you do if the day is off? Do you like walk? Do you run? Do you hang glide?
So I like to do a lot of different things. So I surf. I love to surf. I love horseback riding. Last year, I started taking lessons to learn how to ride bareback. And so I love doing that. Running when I'm training. I've been taking the past month off, but when I'm training, I like to run, going to the beach, hanging out with my son. And then sometimes just, having a couple beers.
Yeah, of course, man. Imperial or Pilsen, right?
That's right. Imperial, Team Imperial all the way.
Let's go. It is really no right or wrong answer, but do you believe you're self-made? Why or why not?
What do you mean by made?
Self-made.
Oh, self-made. Yeah, I would say so. My parents weren't super wealthy. When I moved to Costa Rica, I only had a couple grand in my bank account, and I would definitely consider myself self-made because I've just been doing it since high school on my own, paying my way through, and just really also following what feels right to me, which is also, I think, a big part of being self-made.
True. I go with that. What is on your travel bucket list still?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've never been to Africa. So I really would like to go to Africa, and there's so many parts of Africa to explore. So that would definitely be one. Also never been to Asia. So, there's also a lot of parts of Asia to explore, lots of places to go surf, nature to see. So, I mean, those are two continents. It's not specific places, but I definitely want to make my way to that side of the world because I've just spent most of my time in the Americas and just a little bit in Europe.
Sure. I get that. Sometimes, especially with Africa, there's so many different like environments to visit.
Yeah.
Whether you're a desert person or checking out the rainforest, I totally understand. Favorite time of the day, you think? Your favorite time of the day?
Sunset. Yeah, sunset. Sorry, I was thinking sunset.
Oh yeah, me too. Best time of the day, hands down. And lastly, everyone kind of collects something. What do you collect?
What do I collect? Well, that's a tough challenge because, I sold everything to move to Costa Rica. And so I try to stay light. I still really like books. I still like to read a book, like an actual book. And so I'd say that of all the things that I still collect, that would be books.
That was a good one. Yeah, I like that. I like the fact that you keep it tangible because someone says I collect memories and it's like, well, that's not something we do on purpose. It kind of just happens. Books are a good one. Personally, for me though, I would think I have enamel pins, which is kind of materialistic, but I think they're way more lighter than trying to buy a shirt or a hat wherever I go. But that's just me. Maria, thank you so much for being on the show. The Amsterdam Radio podcast for creatives. Now here's the fun part. If someone wants to look out or book you or even know more about your services or businesses, how do they go about doing that?
All right. So 2 ways you can find me on LinkedIn. So Maria Joyner, Joyner. You can also reach out to me, maria@mariajoyner.com. And there's the 2 ways to reach out.
There you have it. Again, I want to have you back later on in a future episode because I like to see the fact that how your businesses grow. It'll be a lot of fun. Again, you got to make sure we connect with you on LinkedIn and on your website to see if you can book you for things, even personal games. Do you have personal engagements? Do you do TED Talks or anything like that?
I do speaking engagements. I do classes on how to make better sales and marketing spending decisions. So I'm available for speaking engagements.